Mr. Politician, a true Florida story. Ambition, power, fame, but controversy at every turn. Overnight, he became one of Florida's most well-known politicians. But with his disheveled hair, bad suits, and shady relationships with corporate special interests, Mr. Politician has come to represent everything that education supporters must stand together to defeat at the state capitol.
You didn't contribute to my campaign. You didn't come to any of my rallies. And you didn't even support me on election day. Why on earth should I support you now?
Today, Mr. Politician and the other anti-education politicians he represents stand in the way of Florida's efforts to make our schools a priority. Tomorrow, he will try to expand his power and roll back education funding. But yesterday is where it all began. Watch as True Florida Story takes an intimate look inside the life of a man who went from bad seed to pompous politician. Mr. Politician, a true Florida story. With an anti-education agenda that calls for even more cuts in school funding, less pay for fewer teachers and education staff professionals, and more students packed into already crowded classrooms, Mr. Politician has become the face of anti-public school officials across the state. But before he became Mr. Politician, he was just a little politician. Born in the shadows of the state capitol in 1953, and the early chapters of his story were simply a prologue to what was later to come.
I'd like to think he was a sweet little boy, but that's not the right word. Maybe slick? He always knew the right thing to say to get what he wanted, and he learned pretty early the art of making a deal.
Never one to show much respect for his teachers, Mr. Politician did just enough to get by in school, and spent most of his time pulling pranks, causing disruptions, and plotting get-rich-quick schemes to fleece his fellow students. In fact, the only real interest he took in school was his campaign for student council.
Yeah, I ran against him for student council in high school. And there were plenty of, shall we say, irregularities. His one campaign pledge was to shut down the school and get us all jobs at a local shoe factory. And school officials said it was the most negative campaign in school history. Smears, lies, first time that a student council race had ever used autocalls.
Hello? I'm calling on behalf of students for a shorter school day. Did you know that student council candidate Chuck Simmons wants to add more than an hour to every school day? He's pledging to shorten lunch period, eliminate homeroom, and make us all stay longer and work harder. Don't you work hard enough already? Call Chuck Simmons and tell him enough is enough. Tell him that you don't support him or his efforts to keep you in school longer. But, you know, if his mom answers, just hang up, because, well, I don't need that kind of trouble. Paid for by students for a shorter school day, not authorized by any candidate or candidates committee, especially not Mr. Politician.
Those were all lies, of course. But what can you do? In the end, it came down to a recount. But his little brother was in charge of counting the votes. So the fact that he won wasn't much of a surprise.
That student council race was just the beginning. As his political aspirations grew over the years, Mr. Politician learned the easiest way to prosper politically was to have the right friends. And for Mr. Politician, the right friends, and the ones with the deepest pockets, were the corporate special interests out to cripple Florida's public schools. He spent nights, weekends, and vacations hustling campaign contributions and pledging to take money away from the Florida public schools and give it to the wealthy and privileged.
I love him. He's a great person to work with. I just say the word, give him a little incentive, and he's on board for any of our projects. It's so nice to have a politician in our back pockets for whenever we need something done. I even keep him on my speed dial.
But not everyone is a fan. Take one of his youngest former supporters.
He's mean. I love my teacher and he's mean to her. Don't I deserve a good education?
And at every turn, he has begun to face resistance, including Florida's teachers, education staff professionals, and public school supporters throughout the state. But even as opposition begins to rally against Mr. Politician and his anti-education forces, he already appears to be plotting his next move.
Well, my concern is that I can't do enough where I am to slash educational spending, to weaken public schools, to lower our standards. I think it may be time for me to take the next step.
We'll be with you every step of the way, Governor.
So now, with rumors circulating about his potential run for governor of Florida, those who support education and speak for educators and students around the state are gearing up for the next battle. Andy Ford, president of the Florida Education Association.
This upcoming election season is going to be a critical time for us in Florida. Last year, we tasted some real success at the ballot box, but next year is going to be even more critical. And it's not just Mr. Politician. It's everyone that he represents, every candidate who does not pledge to stand with us, every incumbent who has betrayed us, and every special interest group that exists to hurt our cause. The elections for governor, the legislature, the House of Representatives, and the U.S. Senate. This could be a year when we lose ground to those out to weaken our schools, or a year when we stand up and show what we can really do when we go to the ballot box with the sole focus to make our schools a priority.
And so we're left to discover for ourselves what's next for Mr. Politician, for those who join him in his anti-education crusade, and for the educators, parents, and others across Florida who are committed to stopping them. It's up to us. This has been Mr. Politician, a true Florida story.